Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a look at Dan Olsen's The Lean Product Playbook. Now, as a professor, I've seen a ton of these kinds of books. They all promise to turn the super messy process of innovation into some kind of repeatable science. So the big question for us is, does this one actually deliver? Let's find out. All right, let's just start with a really simple but kind of terrifying question. If your product just poof, disappeared tomorrow, would anyone really care? I mean, would your customers just be a little annoyed, or would their day, their workflow, their whole process just completely break? If the answer is just annoyed, well, you haven't hit what Dan Olsen calls product market fit, not even close.
You know that fear. It's the number one fear in business, right? Building something that nobody wants. It's this ghost that just haunts every single founder, every product manager, every exec. It's why literally billions of dollars and just countless hours of work get poured into products that end up in, let's be honest, the digital graveyard. And this is the exact fear that Olsen's playbook is designed to get rid of.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to dig right into that foundational fear we just talked about. Then, we'll pull apart Olsen's main idea, this thing he calls the product market fit pyramid. We'll see how it actually works with some real-world examples. I'll give you my professor's take on it, the good and the bad, and then we'll wrap it all up with 3 things you can do right away, plus a final question to chew on.
All right, let's get into it. Section 1, the fear of building nothing. This is the central problem, the thing that keeps product leaders up at night and why we desperately need a better way to do things. This quote right here really nails the book's value. I mean, a lot of us have read Eric Ries's The Lean Startup, right? The whole build, measure, learn cycle. That's a great philosophy. But it often leaves you asking, okay, that's great, but what do I actually do on Monday morning? That's where Olsen comes in. His book isn't just theory. It's the step-by-step tactical manual for actually putting that philosophy to work.
Okay, that brings us to the core of the whole book, Olsen's product market fit pyramid. Seriously, this thing is a brilliant model for taking this really vague idea of fit and breaking it down into 5 clear, actionable layers, and you have to build it from the ground up.
So everything, and I mean everything, starts right here, at the base of the pyramid, your target customer. Olsen makes a super important point here. You don't just find a market. No, you have to meticulously define it. Who exactly are these people? What are they trying to do? What drives them crazy? If this layer is just a fuzzy idea, the whole thing you build on top of it, it's going to come crashing down. Guaranteed.
Now, what's so powerful about this next layer is the discipline it takes. Because let's be real, most teams want to jump straight to building features, right? That's what Olsen calls the solution space. But the playbook forces you to stay in the problem space. You got to live in that messy, confusing world of customer pain until you have a deep, real understanding of what they actually need. It's tough, but it's essential.
Right. So the crucial point here is that you just can't be everything to everyone. It's impossible. Your value proposition is basically your strategic bet. It's where you look at all those needs you've just uncovered and you make a choice. You say, these are the problems we are going to solve better than anybody else. It forces you to focus.
See how far up the pyramid we are? It's only now, after you've figured out the who, the what, and the why, that you finally get to talk about features. And here's the key. We're not talking about your grand vision with all the bells and whistles. No, we're talking about your minimum viable product, your MVP, the absolute smallest thing you can build to prove that your value proposition actually works for real people. And finally, we get to the top layer, where it all comes together. Because you could have the most perfect value prop, a solid set of features, but if the user experience, the UX, is confusing or clunky or just, a pain to use, your product is dead in the water. A bad UX is like a giant roadblock. It stops people from ever even getting to the value you work so hard to create. So to actually climb this pyramid, Olsen gives us this really clear 6-step process. See how it moves logically from the bottom up? You determine your customer, identify their needs, define your value prop, spec out your MVP, create a prototype, and then, and this is key, you test it with customers. And it's a loop. It's all about continuous learning and taking the risk out of your big ideas. Okay, so the theory sounds great, right? But what's really interesting is seeing how this whole pyramid idea actually holds up in the real world. Does this thing really separate the big wins from the big flops? Let's look at 2 huge, high-profile examples. First, Slack. It actually started as an internal tool for video game company. They started at the very bottom of the pyramid, in the problem space, because they were solving a real annoying problem for their own team. Now Quibi, they did the exact opposite. They started at the top.
They fell in love with a solution, these fancy 10-minute videos, long before they ever proved anyone actually wanted them.
And this is how much it costs for Quibi to ignore that pyramid. $1.75 billion. They spent all that money building out the top of the pyramid, the features, the UX, the celebrity content, on a foundation of, well, nothing. It was a catastrophic failure, and it's a lesson they could have learned with a simple prototype for a tiny fraction of the cost.
Now, as much as I like this framework, it's not a silver bullet. And putting on my professor hat for a second, I have to point out that in today's world, which is just so saturated with products, the whole lean process can run into some pretty serious problems.
Yeah, the lean process can lead you straight into what I call the iterative trap. First, there's what's called incrementality bias. It's great for tweaking a SaaS product, but it's not going to help you invent fusion energy or some other deep tech moonshot. Second, you can get stuck in a local maximum. That's where you perfectly optimize a kind of mediocre idea, and you completely miss the radical pivot that could have been a huge breakthrough. And finally, there's just so much noise out there. Getting a clear signal from user testing is way, way harder than it used to be.
Okay, so keeping those critiques in mind, how can we actually use these powerful ideas in our own work, like tomorrow morning? Let's boil this all down into 3 concrete, actionable takeaways. Okay, takeaway number 1. Audit your problem space. Before you go into your next big meeting, I want you to try this. Force your team to describe the customer's problem without once mentioning your product or its features. If you guys can't do it, and do it clearly, you are at a huge risk of building something nobody's actually asking for.
Next up, take a look at your feature roadmap, but use the Kano model as a lens. Are you just building must-haves? You know, the stuff that's just expected, like wheels on a car? They don't make people happy, but they sure make them unhappy if they're missing. Are you just adding performance features, where more is just better? The real magic, the thing that builds loyalty, is in the delighters, those totally unexpected wow moments. The trap is that most teams live in those top 2 rows and completely forget to invest in the bottom one. And the final takeaway, please, 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 prototype fakes before you build code. Seriously, in this day and age, there is zero excuse to write a single line of production code before you've validated an idea. Use tools like Figma to build super realistic prototypes, or even run a simple painted door test. That's basically a landing page for a feature that doesn't exist yet to measure what people do, not just what they say they'll do. All right, let's bring it all home. Your next move. When you boil it all down, Olsen's playbook is really about the discipline of humility. It's about being able to admit that our first brilliant idea is probably wrong, or at least not quite right yet. It's about embracing a process that respects the customer's reality way more than our own ego.
So let's make this super practical for you. Think about the project you're working on right now. Looking at that product market fit pyramid, which layer feels the shakiest? Where's the weak spot? Is it your definition of the customer? Is your value prop a little fuzzy? Be honest with yourself.
And one last thing to think about. What is the biggest thing that pulls your team out of that all-important problem space and into building solutions way too early? Is it pressure from leadership to ship something? Or is it just that natural urge that we all have as builders to just start making stuff? Figuring out what that obstacle is, well, that's the very first step to actually overcoming it.